Looking back at the footage of Yellow, I noticed a few issues. I'm using the mic on my head phones, but occasionally, I don't know if it's just my mouth is too close to the mic or I'm speaking too loudly. My mic is sort of popping, and sometimes it seems like I'm mumbling, and sometimes it doesn't. I tried looking around, like I've got a mic that I had upstairs, one of the clip-on ones, but it doesn't work, so that was pointless. I haven't got any other solutions, tried my best. There's not a lot I can do except try and modulate my voice. I've never done this sort of thing before, and honestly, after 2 hours of talking, I was just mentally drained. Did the best I could, but this is actually surprisingly tough. But it's also really, really interesting, and hearing myself actually talk about the cards and how I evaluated them, the ways I was trying to break down cards, the synergies I was thinking of. There were a few synergies as well afterwards that I was looking back at, and I thought, well, I didn't mention it, but actually they're possibly deck ideas, especially the expansion, but just in general. And I also realised that what I missed at the end was a overall sort of meta description of the colour. So I went through each card individually, but I didn't at the end of it sort of talk about yellow in terms of what flaws does yellow just have, like just straight yellow. Are there themes in it? How can I identify it? Is it a control colour, an aggro colour? Is it a gem intensive colour? Is it a colour that likes to use lots of abilities? What colours does yellow work well with? I didn't really mention sort of meta decks that involve yellow or how yellow is best utilised. And I got to green and I tried doing green today, and this is my second attempt. The first attempt was just bad, I was looking at the time and I got to about half an hour, 40 minutes. And my voice was already starting to go, and I'd only just made it to Gallows Boy. I was thinking, oh my word, like this isn't going so well. Also, yellow has some common themes, especially in terms of the top tier decks I didn't talk about. But yellow was so much easier, which I didn't appreciate, because the two real top tier decks in terms of yellow are yellow orange, Aztec control, or yellow green control. And there's reason for that. In terms of yellow is a control color, and this is about green. But the problem is that green is a surprisingly balanced color. I sort of talked about the not surprisingly balanced, but it's a balanced color. There are quite a few archetypes, even just within the one drops. Without, I'm going to get specifically into detail of the cards, but you could quite literally just go, right, well, this is for ramp, this is for control, this is for corrupt prayer wheel stretcher decks, Pack Trooper, Fang Alpha 9. Like, green actually, just in terms of its one drops, is already diversifying. The waters are quite muddy for green. There are so many different types of deck you need to talk about. It's so much harder than yellow. Yellow, in looking at the one drops, is effectively, well, Clay Effigy, Maze of Iotiku, why am I putting them in my deck? What do they offer? The one drops were reasonably easy to assess. Are you getting enough value from your actual card slot? Even though, for one drop, 2 for 2 is good. For one mana, it's good. It's good value for the mana. Is it good value for the card slot? It was easy, and I didn't appreciate that. I was thinking, wow, that was really, really difficult. Now I'm on green, and I guess a journey starts with the first step. Journey of 1,000 miles starts with the first step. We are going to go through this, and some archetypes I have very little experience of, but part of these videos is just to highlight areas that I don't really know enough about, or I don't really know how to utilize correctly. Like right now, Fang Alpha 9 and Valkyries are something that I've got a little bit of experience, but not really enough. And when the expansion comes, how do we know there's not going to be that times 10, like just a supercharged version? So that's hopefully going to be highlighted in these videos, just weaknesses and lacks of knowledge. It's going to be painful to hear back because I'm going to sound like an idiot. I think I've really got to do it. I've accidentally given an overview of green. I think after these videos I might also give an overview of the colours. I'll just start, shall I? So Dora, with the base set, this is not good. In a way, looking at it initially, you could sort of see, well, it's sort of a reanimator card. The only problem is right now, it's not really, there's not enough, and it's just too awkward with the cards we have right now. But this is kind of weird, but I like watching Magic the Gathering videos. I've never even played Magic the Gathering, but I really like watching things like Nitsahon's channel, where he has top 10 angels and things like that. And he just sort of breaks down cards in Magic the Gathering and most underrated cards, most overrated. And looking at Dora, the ability to put cards in your boneyard, this actually looks like a sleeper that could, in future expansions, be amazing. Because I see similarities with the way that Nitsahon talks about mechanics like Dredge and, reanimator lists. And I look at Dora and I'm thinking, right now with the base set, is this good? No, this is actually really, really terrible. But some cards require combo pieces. And with future expansions, Dora actually, in some archetypes, might be a must pick. The ability to just shuffle your deck into the boneyard and then combined with other cards, the ability to then use your boneyard as a second hand. But we don't have enough of those cards yet. That's the problem, is Reanimator is actually stunted. And there really is only really one major reanimation mechanic. I suppose that's not true. We'll get into it later as we get into sort of recursion from the boneyard and cards that do that. But overall, Dora is right now, you can't pick it. It's just not good at what it does. It's terrible. 0-3 is pretty bad. Spirit is a good tribal tag, but this isn't. This is just not good. Not good at all. Grinning Collarbock. Yeah, in yellow-green it's a must-have. You want a ramp because it accelerates you to your late game. Part of Collarbock's value, though, I think, is that there is so little ramp, and this is some of the most reliable ramp. And even among ramp cards in the game, of which there are very, very few, this is in the even smaller subsection of ramp, which is permanent ramp. Permanent, I mean, it is conditional, but permanent and conditional ramps, much as once it's ramped, you get the mana. And other colours struggle with this. I mean, just looking at yellow, and I was talking about Foul Harvest. You get free mana. Arguably, it gives you a bit of temporary ramp. You can quickly get out something a bit quicker than you normally would. But it's conditional, Whereas Collarbock on turn 1, burn a green, put down a Collarbock if you're on the play. Oh, when your opponent does it, it's so frustrating. You hate it. There's not a lot you can do unless you're playing purple. And then even when you're playing purple, you're hoping for a Racer in hand. So only one colour can really stop a turn 1 Collarbock instantly before it goes up to 2 energy. And then your opponent's always 1 energy ahead of you, assuming you haven't got a Collarbock out. They're constantly just 1 energy ahead of you, 2 energy ahead of you. Oh, right now in the game, there's so little ramp that Collarbock's value is just increased 100-fold. It's just because it's the only way to ramp. It's frustrating. As expansions come out, it probably won't be quite as valuable. It'll just be one of many tools that you can ramp. But right now, Collarbock, I hate seeing it. Even putting it down on my first turn, I hate it. What are you supposed to do? I'm not really going to talk about changes or nerfs or what they could do to the card. I'm just going to say right now, Collarbock though. Oh, it's frustrating. You hate to use it, but you have to use it. I think it's just too good, especially in control. House Elf really benefits from 2 parts of the card, and those parts are the fact it's a spirit, which is actually a really big deal because there's a specific type of deck which I sort of mentioned when I was just saying, look, you know, the problem with green is it's so muddy just in terms of 1-drops. There are so many different types of decks which these 1-drops go into, all in different ways. I might as well just show it really, but I suppose you could call it an indirect damage, but Corrupt Prayer Wheel, whenever a spirit minion is created, deal 1 damage to your opponent. There's currently just this indirect damage Corrupt Prayer Wheel Stretcher deck, which is so frustrating because in the same way that, you know, if aggro goes perfect and you don't draw well, it can just run you over before you do anything. If that deck sort of gets rolling and gets the Dragon's Teeth early, gets the stretchers out, it is just so difficult to deal with because the only real way of dealing with it is to destroy the artifacts. But you don't normally destroy the artifacts in Pfizer creation decks like that. Because, you know, every time an artifact gets low, they put down another artifact. Normally you kill them before you actually really destroy their artifacts. And it puts you on such a timer. And in that deck, House Elf is excellent. So that's the spirit aspect of it, which in addition, of course, it also does its own version of indirect damage, in as much as it doesn't have to attack at all. But every time an enemy minion attacks, this deals 1 damage. And if you can set it up, this is so irritating for aggro because they want to find empty spots on the board and start going face and just rushing you down as quickly as possible before you've got a chance to shore up your defences. But you have to take this out first. They can't afford to be taking 2, 3, 4 damage basically for free. Like, this is a 1-drop. If they're taking 2, 3, 4 damage from it across a game, this has done its job and more. Like, it's already giving you so much. They have to get rid of it, but the problem is that if it's set up, yes, that works, but how do you set that up? You see? What do you put next to it? Because it has Lurker. What do you put next to the House Elf that protects it? Often in the Spirit decks, there isn't an awful lot you can protect it with. And it has 1/2 as well. So if you put it in the corner, they, you know, Wyvern or they trap, they take out the thing next to it, and then they send down the second trap, and it still lives after attacking him. They do take 2 damage for doing that, and House Elves are really annoying like that. And depending how quickly the deck gets off, the Pfizer creation deck or the stretcher deck, depends on whether that's a worthwhile trade for the player using the indirect damage Corrupt Prayer Wheel stretcher deck. A lot of the time, if you're rolling in artifacts and you've got your smooth setup, you already know what's going to happen and you've got it all, you're ready to roll, then you're quite happy for the House Elf to die after dealing 2 damage, just because your opponent is then focused on having to take it out before it attacks, and that's giving you 1 more turn to put down another artifact. And all those artifacts just build up and, you know, put you on that 4, 5, 6 turn timer. Marching orders. In the decks that it's not good in, it's just complete throwaway. Like, it's just not that good. You can see even in those decks, situationally it could be good, but it's too situational, and a lot of the time it's a waste of a card slot. Of course, situation sort of, you put down Sapo and then they block it with something because Sapo doesn't have overrun. You know, marching orders next turn to shove all their minions out of the way. Then Sapo gets in for 8, 10 damage. That's the situation. You know, that's an easy situation that you're thinking of. For 1 mana, you just cleared the way for Sapo. That's great, but often Sapo doesn't need too much help. And in the late game, if your opponent is putting, you know, 2, 3, 4 minions into Sapo because they're trying to stop it from going face, you're in the driver's seat at that point. At that point, they're reacting to you. You're in your late game. Yellow-green is quite happy to be in that situation because they've got so many bombs and they can just drop them one after another. Your opponent can't keep trading 2, 3, 4 to 1. So It's okay if Sapo goes face, but if you're not quite at that point where you're going face yet, because they still have resources to burn through, that's sort of okay a lot of the time as well. It sounds a bit weird, but you know, marching orders, you can throw everything to the other side. Well, in the late game, you can put Sapo down, and then you could just put Iku on the other side. Then there's an Iku and a Sapo, and you just keep dropping bombs. So you don't need it in that situation. You can still see sort of like parts of the game where that it might be useful anyway. But for a card slot, those situations don't come up enough, and you already have so many alternative solutions in a deck that you don't need it. That is one side of marching orders. The other side is in the decks where marching orders is good, is really, really good. And I'm mostly talking about Fang Alpha 9. So I've already done sort of a video on Fang Alpha 9. But in that deck, it is so clear that marching orders is a win condition for you. It's a massive win condition because the issue is that the K9s need to bunch together. So it's not that difficult for your opponent to know where to put their resources. It's telegraphed. It's you know 2, 3, 4 turns. They can already see what's going to happen. You already know what's going to happen. The ability to march in orders is a win condition. The reason I stopped playing Fang Alpha 9 was because I've only got one copy of marching orders, and in that deck, it's the finisher. You know, it's the finisher. Sometimes it's Horn and marching orders. Sometimes it's just marching orders, but you've got your pack, and your opponent is in massive trouble. It's reached a point where they cannot be taking damage to the face. For 1 mana, marching orders, great deal. Oh, this is what I was talking about. You know, I'm already at 17 minutes. I haven't even made it halfway through the 1-drops. I might have to speed this up, I suppose. Moth Mara is a spirit, same as House Elf. Sometimes they're in the same deck. Obviously, this is more in the Spellflux decks. And, you know, 1-2 is a terrible stat line. You can see how you might accidentally be dealing just 2, 3, 4 damage. You don't really have to buy into it all that much to get value out of Moth Mara. In as much as just a normal deck that's not a Spellflux deck will accidentally be dealing damage with a Moth Mara on the board. You just use spells naturally throughout the game, as a general rule. But, you know, the 1-2 stat line, are you really going to dedicate resources to protecting Moth Mara just so you can ping off a damage or 2 a turn? If it buys into Corrupt Prayer Wheel type decks, it's good. I'd still be putting House Elf before it, but you can only have 2 House Elves. So that's sort of understandable. It's okay, just this 1-2 stat line. Something has to balance it, you know. I mean, you can see with green 0-3, 1-1, 1-2, 1-2. Their 1-drops are not great, and his 1-2 stat line is really bad right now in the game. Overkill. I love this card, but at the same time, I also see it's a noob trap. I suppose I'll just sort of like give both sides of how I see the card, but the reason I like it is that I rather like the idea of just a 1 mana cantrip. I really like that idea of just filling your deck. Instead of playing with 40 cards, I'm playing with 36 if I take 4 overkills. And then in the early game, I can just put these on a Maze Viatiku. And the whole point is that I'm just digging. So those things that I really need, you know, for example, against Valkyrie, the things that I really need more than anything is Misanthropia. Or, you know, perhaps Scourge of Serpents, although my opinion on Scourge of Serpents is pretty obvious. But, you know, things like Misanthropia. And going from 40 cards in your deck to essentially 36 and being able to just keep digging and just keep rolling over, I think Overkill's pretty fine, you know. If I top deck an Overkill and I'm digging, then I can just keep digging. It's not difficult. You can even put the overrun on your enemy on an opponent's minion. And with the Misanthropia, that's okay. That's not so bad. If you're desperately looking for the Misanthropia, and that's the only way you can really hamstring the Valkyries before they get to that Horn turn, and you manage to get the Misanthropia off. The fact that one of the Valkyries has overrun because your minions are just getting destroyed, you have no board left. It's the last throw of the dice. Well, you know, if it was 4-4, now it's 1-1 with overrun. The overrun hasn't hurt you. It's only this green gem. It's so frustrating. That's the problem. Is you can have. I'd love to dig for 1 mana, but digging for 1 green gem. Suddenly you dig, you find what you need. And I'm talking about Misanthropia, but I'm talking about other tools as well. Where you just need to get through your deck. This is a great deck thinner, except for the point that often what you find better not be in green, and you better have enough gems if the thing you're looking for isn't in green. So talking about that Misanthropia turn, for example, Misanthropia needs 3 yellow gems. So you've got in a YG, maybe you've got 2 green gems maximum. If you've got 3 green gems, suddenly things are getting a little bit awkward. You might still be able to turn it around in time for Misanthropia, but not, if your first 3 turns, you're 3 green gems, well, you can only Misanthropia on turn 6. That's not. Valkyries have probably done it by then. The Horn is definitely coming out. If they're going enchantments, then they might have even saved the Leprechaun's coin just so they can Horn on turn 5 instead. That's too late. So you've only got 2 green gems to dig, and it's competing with other digging tools, such as Raid the Tombs, which of course takes 2 green gems. So if you dig with Overkill, then you can't dig with your Raid the Tombs when you're desperately looking for this Misanthropia. Of course, you'd rather dig with the Raid the Tombs. And that's sort of the other side. Like, I think it's amazing. I think it's amazing in that respect. It's a 1 mana cantrip. That's great. Really thins out the deck. Super quick. Super easy to use. Just allows me to dig very quickly. But the other side of it is that green gem is a killer. In terms of card slot, it's not actually valuable. You just have an actual good card in this card slot. Like, if it can't be, because there isn't, but if there was a third Misanthropia, you could just put a Misanthropia here instead. Or perhaps even a Volkov Heavy, because the Valkyries come down 4-4, they've got Horn. Putting down a Volkov Heavy, sort of just to get in the way of a 4-4. Suddenly it doesn't matter, it's got 2 attacks because it dies to Volkov straight away. They'll probably stay away though on that Valkyrie. That'd be the Valkyrie they stay away if things going well for them. So at that point, Volkov isn't doing anything, unfortunately. Pack Trooper, of course, in Fang Alpha 9 and K9 decks. I wouldn't even say it's fantastic in those. 1-2 is just this criminal stat line. It's the stat line that Trap comes down on 2, destroys it, and is still left over. 1-2 just isn't a good stat line. It's really bad. Really, really unfortunate. Because at least with 0, it sounds weird, but at least with 0 attack, Kolobok at least can't kill itself and get the ramp. And if you've got mazes of Iatikus, Clay Effigies, then and you're just looking for the bounce so that you can send Kolobok back to hand and they get no ramp whatsoever, then you'd probably rather have that. Like, just this 1 attack isn't. 1-2 is bad. It's sort of a necessary in Fang Alpha 9. You've got no choice. This card is necessary. You have to put it in. You'd rather not, but you have to put down this first K9 just to try and get the ball rolling. Hope they don't have a Trapezist or a Racer in the Shadows. Some way of dealing with this, because this has to go down so that you can then start the train. All your other K9s come down, get stronger, you make a massive pack. But this is definitely, the start of Fang Alpha 9 is definitely one of the weak links, and it can just be taken out. And then, Fang Alpha 9 struggles to really get going. It needs K9s altogether. Ruskin's Bite, probably one of the best 1 mana enchantments. It might be one of the best enchantments in terms of value for mana. There are some fantastic enchantments, but for 1 mana, getting +1 attack and armor 1 is pretty great. You see it a lot in rainbow decks because it's good to burn, but also putting it down on the field doesn't feel too bad either. The armor 1 really benefits large minions more than anything, which sounds a little bit weird. But I mean, part of the reason that Volkov Heavy is a good card is that it's a 5-5 with armor 1, and the fact that it's 5-5, the sort of the implication is that it takes more than one minion to destroy it. But if it took 2 minions to destroy Volkov Heavy, well, Armor 1 has negated 2 damage. So you need to deal 7 damage, not 5. So the bigger the minion, the more minions are required to destroy it. But for each individual minion, Armor 1, of course, pings off. Also, you know, there is a Plague Maiden required. Well, you can't really say it's a combo of just the 2 pieces, sort of. But Plague Maidens really like this because you can put a Plague Maiden on it and then their effect means that they don't kill themselves, and then you can just Plague Maiden someone to death, clear the entire board, and just have them Plague Maiden. I really like it. It's just extremely solid. It's a good first turn play if you're playing K9s and you know that your opponent is playing something that's more than capable of immediately taking out the 1-2. Maybe you go Rustlins first. I'd experiment with it a bit more. But I've never felt bad about putting this down on the field, apart from if my opponent puts down a collar block. But that is true of almost any play, right? If your opponent puts down a collar block, that's true. There's not a lot you can do. Sweet Spinneret. There is a deck which I just rage conceded to, and I don't know if I've still got it, because no, but oh, it was just nasty. It was so horrible to play against it. It's even worse because then after you play it, you realise it's not actually that consistent. But when everything's going, the whole point is sort of Sweet Spinneret comes down, and whatever minion it is, it's the fact that it turns it ephemeral, and there are a bunch of bounce spells like Rewind Hex, Led Astray, Detained. I'm trying to find Detained. Have I lost Detained in all of this? Ridiculous. Yeah, I mean, obviously the other, the flip side of Detained, where you can just return a minion. Well, if it's ephemeral, it just disappears. It doesn't go to the Boneyard either, which is really, you know, if the deck works really well and everything goes perfectly, you put things down and it's all just turning ephemeral and getting bounced, and it's just a nightmare. Like, I rage conceded against it. It was so horrible. But I downloaded the deck and then I played it and I realised you can't climb with that deck. When everything goes perfectly, it's great, and you destroy people because they never get anything back. You know, their Vixen goes down, Sweet Spinneret, and you bounce it. Even stuff like Icutursos or Perfect Grades, Sweet Spinneret, and you bounce it, you know. And then it's gone. They can't get it back. So you can just take out all of your opponent's tools one by one. But you can't do it consistently, and it's a combo piece. Like, you need all the pieces of the combo. And, you know, if it's not working quite well, or if you don't get the perfect draw and things don't go smoothly, then you've got a 1-1 for 1 that made something ephemeral. But if your opponent isn't aware of what the game plan's supposed to be, and they've put down a Meso Libre, you made a Meso Libre a 2-3, and this isn't great. When things go wrong, this card is very bad. It's not consistent value, but it can be a nightmare when everything goes well. Vodnik Informant. I mean, the best thing about this card is that it's a spirit. It's nice seeing your opponent's hand. I mean, reveal your opponent's hand until end of turn, because of course you can see that any cards that you see, you can then see for the rest of the match. So, but you can't see any cards that end at the hand after that, of course. But the information is good, but it's not worth a turn 1 play of a 1-2. I've talked about 1-2 enough at this point. I think revealing your opponent's hand is nice, but if I could be 1 mana ahead with a collar block, I would do that. Or if I was playing, you know, Corrupt Prayer Wheel, I'd rather put a House Elf down. You know, if I was playing Fang Alpha 9, Pack Trooper, Rustlin's Bite, there are so many things ahead of this. It's just not a good card of right now, I don't think. Wake the Bones. Excellent. There's sort of this give and take with this and Shroud of the Pit, where because Wake the Bones is cheap, you want it to bring out something heavy, because Shroud of the Pit is an expensive card but gives you consistent value, and gives you, has 1 energy. You want it to be using stuff that's cheap. Having a copy of Wake the Bones is pretty good use for card slot, because what it actually represents, this card might as well say second Sapo, second Issue Terso, something like that. Just another bomb, yet again, you can drop on your opponent, and for 1 mana, 1 green gem. You can bring it out at the end and just slam it down, which is pretty invaluable. It's sort of a little bit of a flex. If you're struggling in the early game, then at least it gives you the capability to Wake the Bones, a Meso Libre, or a Maze or something. If your opponent is just running you over and your hand is janky, then Wake the Bones just to give you another blocker and to try and hold on while you keep digging, try and turn that corner, is fair enough. It's a pretty good card. It's versatile, definitely a one of at least. You can go up to 4, but if you think about it, your first Wake the Bones brings out the best bomb you have available to bring out. So the second Wake the Bones can only bring out the second best, and the third Wake the Bones can only bring out the third best. There's a point where you'd just rather have a good card in this slot, not one that brings back a good card, because the cards before it are already replicating what it's doing with the cards that you want out of the Boneyard in the first place. Bold Omega isn't even used in a lot of canine decks. It's a 1/2 for 2 mana. The life tap often isn't that relevant. Breach. This is too slow. If you can get the breach off and it becomes, a 3/3, congratulations. But it doesn't have overrun. The life tap starts small. It's sort of like Ankle Biter. Your opponent can see this coming a mile away. It doesn't benefit from other canines. You would honestly rather put down another Pack Trooper than this, because you put down a 1/2. You could put this down next to a Pack Trooper. The Pack Trooper would then become a 2/3. This is still a 1. It doesn't benefit from any other canines. This is still a 1/2. That's just so fragile. That's ridiculously easy to take off the field again. A trap can take this off, then the Pack Trooper's back to 1/2. If you had 2 Pack Troopers, at least they're both 2/3. Now a Trapeze, this isn't an answer anymore. It'd have to be an Infused Trapeze, which takes all your opponent's mana, and then the pack, then gets a chance to get bigger. So, not a big fan. Born Again, definitely a one of in most decks, just because it's consistent value. It keeps coming back to your hand, which means you can maintain card advantage really, really well. Hand advantage, I suppose you could say. But you get hand advantage, it just keep giving you consistent value. Having at least one of in a deck is fantastic. In Disc of Cicadia, stuff like that, you want 2 because you can discard it from your hand and then it comes back. And then you're drawing a card every 2 turns, which is fantastic at that point. At that point, we're talking major hand advantage. 2/1 is... Normally I'd say that 2/1 for 2 mana is terrible, but in green, and especially in yellow-green, 2/1 isn't that bad because the stats the right way around. 1/2 is terrible. 2/1 is decent, and the things that are good against 2/1 aren't good against the rest of yellow-green. It's almost like this yin-yang thing, where 2/1 means that stuff like Trap, which can take out your Maze of IRTQs and your Effigies and your Collar Box and still be around, like they go into Born Again and the Trapeze dies and the Born Again comes back at the end of the turn, you can keep using it. But the things that can ping it off really easily, the rest of yellow-green doesn't care about. So Born Again in a way sort of covers weaknesses. If something is good against Born Again, it's not good against the bombs and the card draw and the hand advantage that yellow-green has. And things that are good against yellow-green, Born Again sort of helps you, such as aggro, stuff like that. Born Again is just allows you to sandbag a little. I don't want to use the word sandbag because I'm using it in terms of it just tries to stop the flood. It's just helping stop that. That 2 damage takes off an Iron Belly or a Trapezist, or they have to avoid it, and it's just trying to hold down a lane or 2. So it helps. It helps a lot in aggro, which is a weakness. So you should at least have one in yellow-green. And of course in Discus card you should probably have two. Circle of Protection is really amazing, but it's sort of a win more card. Yeah, you know, it's so conditional that it's a win more card. You know, this gains more value the more friendly minions you have on the field. And it gains more value when you have minions that you really want armor 2 and warded on. So things that are really valuable and really good. But if your board is full of minions that are like that, then you're already ahead of the game as yellow-green. And I don't see it too much in other deck archetypes either. I mean, yellow-green struggles in the early games. Your board probably isn't that big. If your board is that big, then you're winning. And you don't need this card. The times that you really need this card are the times when you're already ahead. But it doesn't help you when your board is low or you're struggling. If you draw this, you know, like, wow, that Maze of Itiki is really going to appreciate that armor 2 warded. You know, perhaps it could help you with your Iku Terso at the end to get rid of destroy effects. But, you know, in terms of a card slot, you could just have something good in the card slot that is a threat or forces your opponent to divert resources to it. I'm not really a gigantic fan. Armor 2 warded, there are ways of getting around it. Yeah, it's sort of a win more card. Like if I drew this and I was in trouble, what is this going to do? Not a lot. I don't really like it. Detained. It goes in my decks, it comes back out of my decks. You know, 4 mana, 3 gems altogether for both sides of the card. Normally what happens is, you know, in the early game, you know, a Collarbock gets detained, so it doesn't get a chance to move and ramp up. And then in the late game, you know, you've got a cheap 2 mana bounce to something. And in that respect, it's really good. Sometimes it's hard to find the card slot for it. When you look at the 40 and you're trying to find things to cut, you have your ways of bouncing things, and big threats don't need to be bounced a lot of the time in yellow-green. And it's not just yellow-green either. Like if your opponent has a big threat, sometimes Deployed is great. You know, especially in combo pieces or if it's ephemeral, the ability to bounce it is great. But if it's not ephemeral, it's coming back next turn, so you've brought a turn. Sometimes that's key, but at the same time, if your opponent puts down a big threat, well, you can put, you know, like Iku Terso in front of the threat, now it can't attack. Sapo in front of the threat, well, now it's destroyed. You know, Traitorous Murmur on the threat, now it's yours. You know, it's just Detained is often not, is more of what you already have. Yellow-green is normally quite comfortable, and if someone's dropping bombs, you don't mind because your bombs are bigger and your late game is better. You know, your top end is just more dense than most top ends. So somehow it gets cut while also being a great card. I don't think it's really going to lose value in the expansion though. Oh, just a sec. My voice is going already, so I'm going to just take a minute and get some water. Right, doublethink. In Arena this is amazing, as sort of basic elimination it's amazing. It doesn't get around warded. It's still really, like, you can definitely see this as base elimination. In as much as, you know, your opponent can put down, you know, a Celestial Dragon. Well, no, it can't put down a Celestial Dragon because Celestial Dragon's warded. Let's think of something else. Your opponent puts down, I mean, I might as well just say Iku Terso for all of these, really, let's be honest. But I mean, Short Stag too, because they're at my head, because of course I'm thinking yellow-green. How do they fit into yellow-green? You know, your opponent puts down anything which is big, and you just have some rubbish in front of it. Doublethink in some ways could be considered a Dark Passenger, but Dark Passenger replaces itself. and it gets around warded. Doublethink requires a minion to actually be able to attack the thing in front of it. And sometimes it works, but sometimes it doesn't. Take purple, for example, like I've just mentioned it, but Celestial Dragon doesn't care about doublethink. Perfect Grade comes down and it clears everything in front of it. So what exactly is attacking? You know, you're going to doublethink the Perfect Grade and attack it with what? You need a rush minion. Green doesn't really have anything like that. So in green-red, maybe doublethink's a bit easier. But if you doublethink, you know, your opponent's minion, you're losing a card and you need something else to run into that minion. So you can get value, you know, whatever the value of the minion is plus doublethink, you know, can be lower than, you know, whatever 7 mana, 8 mana card they put down. So it can be value appropriate, but that's 2 cards into one. So your opponent got a 2-for-1 trade. Whatever doublethink did, you know, whatever doublethink is just destroyed effectively. And it doesn't work on everything. Whereas at least Dark Passenger, you get a value trade and it replaces itself. So you're not falling too far behind on card advantage. Doublethink plus a minion is quite literally a 2-for-1. So you might get value from it, but you lose card advantage. Gallows Boy. I wish I could use this more. I want to use it more, but it's one of those things that in a Void is really, really strong and should be in decks because it's so good. But it ends up getting cut because it doesn't synergize too well with most things. Like, I suppose it could synergize with White Moon Arena, but I don't see it in too many decks like that. If you were trying to tech against some sort of orange deck, then of course Armageddon Angel isn't taking this off the field. And they're probably not going to use a seal on it either. So at that point, you're getting fantastic value. I suppose you could argue out of Gallows. It's good, but there is just too much. You know, sort of for the 2 spot, depending on the actual type of deck you're running, either you really want Matryoshka or Raid the Tombs, Rewind Hex, Samasek, Detained, Born Again. You know, there are other things ahead of it. It's a very neat card. I think you get a lot out of 2 mana. It's good, but it just gets cut eventually, a lot of the time. This, well, I've made my experiments with them and I recorded it and it did not work the way I wished it worked. It's frustrating. There are ways of using this, and I think in the same way that I think that Dora, you know, as expansions come out, Garden of Irioi is going to be increasing in value. I still think there's value in it, but the value is at the wrong end for well, I was going to say yellow-green, but for most decks, because if you put down a collar block on it, it moves onto it, so the collar block gets the ramp, then it goes back to hand. But now it's free cost. A free cost collar block, is suddenly 3 times more expensive. So where Garden of Irioi sort of gets its relative worth is if someone came up to you and was just like, I don't know why I'm using the example of, oh well, if someone came up to you in the street, but if someone came up to you and said, you can use your twins for 6, and then do you want to use your twins again for 8? Like, what? That's still a fantastic deal. You're saying if I spend another 8 mana, I get to use the twins again. Sure, there's no problem with that. That is such a great deal. You get to use Sapo again, but you have to pay, 9. Yeah, like that's, relative to the value you're getting out of your top end, Garden is really great. I mean, not a Heaven and Hades level of really great, but in a similar vein of it can just keep churning. Your bombs come down on a Garden, and your opponent uses any sort of destroy effect, and they come back down, and you used your 7 mana Sapo, then you've got a 9 mana Sapo, and you're still getting a 2-for-1 with that. You know, you can keep dropping your bombs, and going from 7 to 9 isn't a big deal in the same degree that going from 1 to 3, or, you know, 3 to 5 is. Having a 5 cost that was originally, you know, like, oh, that feels horrible. Like, do you want a 4 mana Sugar Plum Fairy? No, that sounds nasty. I don't want that. On the other hand, would you take a 9 mana Iku Terso? That's debatable. You know, that's really interesting. Especially, and sort of more importantly, they've just used resources to get rid of Iku the first time. So the second Iku Terso then comes into a situation where your opponent has less resources, so its value increases. You know, it's not just 9 mana, but it's also coming into a better situation. So it's sort of worth. Definitely debatable. I think, yeah, but that's the problem, is God of Ira is offering you value at the top end. Yellow-green already has the bombs, though. You know, it's sort of, well, Iku's dead, no worry, wake the bones, get Iku back again. Iku's dead, here's a Sapo. Iku's dead, here are the twins. You know, you have so many bombs. It's nice to get them back, but for a card slot, you know, it's helping you with something that's already a strength. You really don't worry about your late game unless you're playing an ultra greedy deck, which is designed to beat greedy decks. Some sort of Fires of Creation deck, maybe Garden could gain a lot of value, because, you know, eventually with Fires of Creation they start bringing out 8 mana, 9 mana constructs, and that's just, you need to be able to fight back. Hacker's Intuition, if your opponent doesn't realize you have it, you know, even just having, you know, just 2 or 3 mana left over happens surprisingly commonly. Suddenly throwing a Hacker's Intuition on a Sapo, and you've just dealt 12 damage, volition it, and you've killed them, sort of out of nowhere. It's a little bit ridiculous in that regard. Just the fact that it's agile, you know, is sort of a tech. It's a tech in the way that Overkill is a tech. I still like to have at least 1 copy of Overkill on my deck, even if I'm not using it as a cantrip, because when you go for the Abomination 1-turn kill, or you just need your Sapo to get over something, then the overrun is invaluable. You know, it's a tech in that way. You know, given your Abomination agile when you're trying to finish your opponent is a massive deal. You know, your Abomination comes down 15, 20 strength. Your opponents block the board, but, you know, 4 mana for the Abomination, 2 mana for the Volition, 2 mana for the Hacker's Intuition, 8 mana for your win that's not expensive, especially not in a ramp deck, especially not in yellow-green where you go for your entire deck. So it's pretty good. It doesn't replace itself. I don't really like it. I prefer Overkill. As a general rule, Abomination isn't really, you're not really thinking, oh my god, like, I'm losing 3 damage because the minion that he's used as a chump blocker in front of, you know, because he's trying to cover the board. And you, of course, put your Abomination next to the lowest health minion when you overrun it. You know, theoretically it has, you know, 3 health or 4 health, whatever. You're not normally thinking, oh, well, I'm losing 4 damage here. That's not normally a concern if you have 15, 20 strength. So, you know, and Overkill actually replaces itself, and then I can just Bald Mountain and bring it back later if I need to. Or I can just naturally win through bombs. So it doesn't replace itself. For a card slot, sort of hard. Sometimes you can get a surprise kill because your opponent doesn't realise you have it. But that's sort of a stupid reason to have a card in your deck. You know, if your opponent doesn't know you have it, then it's a good card, but it doesn't have a lot of value if your opponent can play around it. That sounds sort of weird. But, you know, like, your opponent can know you have Born Again in their deck. They can play around it, but you can still attain value. Same with everything here. You know, the good cards attain value. Your opponent knows you have them, but you're still, you know, it's impossible to play perfectly around them so you don't achieve any value for some of these cards. Matryoshka in Fires of Creation is a fantastic card. I think it's pretty good in quite a lot of green decks. I've tried it in green red, and I even tried it in a dashing ringmaster, green red yellow, which was weird. One of the definite sort of things to take away from that was the ability to trade upwards with Matryoshka. You normally throw this on the field. The 10 health is slightly low unless you're actually going into artifacts a little bit. But the ability to, you know, have a rush minion, Matryoshka, and trade upwards, you know, 2, 3, 4 turns is a big deal. Matryoshka allows you to trade upwards and create tempo plays. You definitely get more out of Matryoshka as a general rule than the 2 mana. It's really good. Of course, it means that, you know, Clay Effigy, you can suddenly ping little things off the board. If someone puts a Wings of Abaddon down and then they destroy something else, but there's just a little effigy, and you've got a Matryoshka in hand, well, you've just taken out 4 mana, and the Matryoshka is still there, and it can keep allowing you to trade upwards. Super valuable. Mavka is threatening, but just 2/2 as a stat line. You know, 2/2 for 2 mana. Deadly is scary, but that's not a winner in a way that so many things kill 2 health, you know. Just a Thunderclap destroys this. You know, a Trapezist kills this. You know, there have been so few cases where someone's had a Mavka and they've put it in front of something, and I've been like, well, I don't know remotely how to handle this. It just doesn't. It's a bit too slow. It seems nice, but 2/2 for 2 that just gets knocked off the board by a Racer in the shadows. You know, 2 gems as well. It's sort of locking you. It's awkward. I don't. If you're going to go, you know, 2 mana, 2 gems, you know, Raid the Tombs, as a general rule, is one of the best draws in the game. For 2 mana, you draw 2 cards. That's fantastic. You don't care too much about banishing the bottom 2 cards of your Boneyard most of the time, unless you're not paying attention and you accidentally banish your Born Again, which, you know, I've never done, of course. That's ridiculous. How could I possibly do anything like that? Yeah, there's not a lot else to say. It's 2 mana, you get 2 cards. That is fantastic value, in the way that, you know, Ichthys is fantastic value. It's hard to complain too much about this. The 2 green gems is a little janky because it's cheap enough that if you really need it, it's so much better than Revelation, except the 2 green gems mean the 2 cards you're getting is locking you out of your green a little bit. In the late game, not so much, you know, of course, but in the early game, if you draw 2 green cards with Raid the Tombs, you draw 2 cards and you've got hand advantage and it was super cheap. You could probably do something else with your turn. The cards you just drew aren't going to be the answers to the problem you have right now. They're a problem. They're a solution to problems you might have later. But you're already sort of a turn behind. The 2 gems is a problem, but the card is still great. It's still worth using, and it's still in most of my decks. Normally 2 of. I don't really run 3 or 4 of because your Boneyard is only so big, and you can't use this unless you have 2 cards in the Boneyard, unfortunately. And you know, 4 of it, you're running through 8 cards in your Boneyard. That's a significant amount in your Boneyard. Suddenly Abomination isn't really a 1-turn kill. Get out of jail sort of card. Rewind Hex. I love this, but it's hard to. I love the actual cards, and I think it's fantastic value, and it can save your life. And you know, someone will throw something onto it to heaven and back, and then you'll just bounce it, and you'll get such great value from it. Or they'll put something on a White Moon Arena, and they're like, oh my god, you know, like, oh, my Celestial Dragon's on a White Moon Arena. I'm just gonna start taking out everything. Rewind Hex, almost always, in terms of value, for 2 mana, you're bouncing back, you know, 4, 5, 6 plus mana's worth of stuff back to your opponent's hand. If it's ephemeral, even better. You know, if they put something ephemeral on it, then it just disappears. It's more an issue that before I say that, also it also kills their next draw. You know, by putting it back on top of their deck, you know what they're drawing next, and it's an enchantment, and a lot of the time, it's not as good as what they could have drawn otherwise, and it's normally, if the enchantment that you've just bounced to the top of their deck is the solution to the problems that they currently have, you know, is the solution to the puzzle that the match currently is, then you're probably already losing the game, honestly. You know, if that's the solution to the puzzle and that's their way of getting around the questions that you're putting towards them, and you give it back to them, then you're probably in such desperate circumstances that you have no other choice than to give it back to them, and the game is over. So yeah, trades upwards, it's sort of, just in terms of card slots, hard to really, you know, when it comes to cutting down cards, it goes in the deck and then you end up with 56 cards and you start looking for things to cut, and this is one of them. A lot of the time I end up with a copy or two. It always seems to be great, but it's never quite, you know, it's rarely the game winner I'd like it to be. It's a nice value play, but it's not always good enough. Aggro doesn't care about it too much. Even enchantment decks don't care about it. Fires of Creation doesn't care about it. There's just a little bit too much that doesn't care all that much about Rewind Hex. It doesn't care enough about Rewind Hex. You know, to put it in a deck you want to consistently climb with. You know, there's too often it's not exactly a dead card, but it's just not the greatest value. Somerset, yeah, Fires of Creation decks love this. It's sort of good anyway, sort of good against aggro. The fact that it's piercing isn't really that relevant most of the time. It's okay, you know, it's just a cheap, easy artifact of Fires of Creation to start that train going, so they can then start putting, you know, all their constructs down. And then they can start divining for more artifacts, and then those artifacts, of course, create more constructs. It's okay, you know, it buys them time. That's what it's supposed to do. The whole purpose of the card really is just to buy as much time as possible so that you can start getting your Fires of Creation going. Because Fires of Creation is arguably sort of the greediest path. There's a point where there's not a lot you can do against someone who has 5 artifacts. You know, if they've still got reasonable health and they've got the train going with 5 artifacts, you're in trouble. Somerset helps them to do that a lot of the time. Not one of the best artifacts, but not one of the top 5 artifacts. The Fires of Creation doesn't have a lot of choice right now. You know, this is base set. There aren't a lot of artifacts. There's even fewer good artifacts. This one's decent. That's good enough, I guess. Spellflux. This is what the Spellflux archetype is around, that I was sort of talking about with Mothmara a little bit. But Spellflux isn't currently a top tier deck. It's sort of a fun deck that you might play casual with. Zero's getting reworked, and I think there's going to be more to come in terms of spells. I don't know. I mean, some people are talking about, you know, a path coming out, a spell path coming out, because, you know, you've got construct paths and artifact paths, enchantment paths. There'll be a spell path. Maybe there will be, maybe there won't be. At least for right now, though, Spellflux isn't a tier 1 archetype. Honestly, it's probably a tier 3 or 4 archetype. I've played it a little bit. It's okay, but there's not enough to support it as it is right now. You need to find your Spellflux Cauldron. You need a board that you can then buff with your Spellflux Cauldron, and you need your opponent to just sort of like give you the ability to start setting things up without destroying this. I don't know. It requires it requires quite a lot, and green on its own doesn't really give the things that Spellflux needs on a consistent enough basis to really make maximum use out of this. But as is so often the case, I mean, honestly, green-red seems to work really well. There is sort of a green-red aggro variant, because aggro really does end up with 3 or 4 minions on the board, because it never really wants to trade, you know, all the rush minions and, you know, all the aggro is going to all the empty lanes, so you will find a turn where you've got 3 or 4 minions. And suddenly Spellflux Cauldron, you know, there's a deck archetype for it, but it doesn't work consistently enough to be a top tier constructed deck list right now, as things are. Spirit Stones, I've played it a lot. It seems really neat, you know, sort of, especially in green purple. I was sort of talking about this earlier with the fact that you know, you've got a lot of spirits in green, you know, House Elf, Mothmara. One of the best things about them is that they're a spirit, not specifically for Spirit Stones, more for Corrupt Prayer Wheel. But this is sort of a card that you throw in there, and Spirit Stones plus Rider in the Shadows, if you're playing green purple, just eliminates something straight away and then deals 1 damage to your opponent. You've got the Corrupt Prayer Wheel out, you've dealt 2 damage to your opponent, you've healed 1 life, and something has been bounced. And you know, for Spirit Stones plus the Rider, if you have Shroud of the Pit, that's a fantastic deal. Your opponent then has to play around Spirit Stones, because having Ephemeral is too big of an issue for stuff like Reanimator. Oh no, that's not. I don't mean Reanimate in terms of the deck type, I just mean Reanimate in terms of, you know, recursion, stuff like Wake the Bones and stuff. Having Ephemeral on your most valuable things, and Spirit Stone's Racing Shadow is almost inevitably used against something big like a Celestial Dragon, you know, which is 3 mana. It's a 2 for 1, but you know that Celestial Dragon's then gone, whereas your Racer is in your graveyard and Shroud of the Pit just pulls it back out again, and you can use it all over again. It's a neat card, you know. As a mythic, you only get 1, so you can't reliably use it. It's okay, you know. Sometimes it takes something big off, but you lose card advantage. It has to be a 2 for 1. Sugar Plum Fairy. Oh, this card is in a weird spot. I really like it. A 2/1 Lurker Agile Life Tap is so much for 2 mana, and aggro has to take this off the field because they can't race you properly if you're getting 4 health swings every single time this attacks. You know, Agile Life Tap means it's under no obligation to attack anything. It can just keep hitting face. Your opponent has to take it off the board. Aggro doesn't like it. But other archetypes such as Fires of Creation and enchantments don't mind too much about you sort of getting high health, because eventually they will outvalue you. And you know, it's pinging them for 2 damage. It's okay. Eventually they'll get around to dealing with it though. You can get value out of it. You know, you can get more than 2 mana's worth of value out of Sugar Plum Fairy. You almost always get more than 2 mana's value out of Sugar Plum Fairy. It's a good card. I don't like cutting it. Sometimes, you know, I've experimented with it. It's won me a game or 2, practically, but it's also a card that if it comes up late in the game, it's just dead. Like, it's not doing enough. You know, drawing this late game isn't worth what it gives you if you draw it early game. In a way that, you know, if you draw a you know, this is sort of like the example that everyone's used, but of course if you draw a collar block late game, it's a 1/1 for 1. You don't need the ramp anymore, it's late game. You know, getting an extra mana normally isn't a massive deal. A 1/1 for 1, if you draw this off the top of your deck late game, is terrible. But what it gives you in early game is so great that it's worth that risk, you know. It's just the ability to ramp, especially right now where ramp is so scarce, is worth it. So Kolobok is making that okay. Respectively, that's all risk worth taking. Sugar Plum Fairy, it just isn't quite that. It isn't quite that. Putting this down on your turn 2 it means that theoretically whatever you put down on your turn 1 could protect it because it has Lurker. But in yellow-green, what's your turn 1 play? Maze of Ayatiku. Did you then not draw a card? Just so the maze could protect the Sugar Plum Fairy. But what has your opponent put down? Eager Recruit. Well, if it's Eager Recruit, then they've attacked onto Eager Recruit. Maze is standing there, but you've decided not to sap it for free health. Try and keep up. Then they put down whatever they put down. Sugar Plum Fairy's not, but then both lanes are covered. Sugar Plum Fairy has to attack something, and Maze of Ayatiku can't attack anything. So the fact that it's agile is sort of irrelevant. It gets to pick its target, but it could do that even without agile. That's sort of useless. You managed to get 2 full health out of it, but that's not the same as ramping up by 1 mana, and it's dead in the late game. So. It can be a game changer, but there's 2 narrow situations in which it's good. Almost inevitably, +2 attack and Alpha Strike means you can trade up into something. But the reason cards like this often aren't liked, is for a similar reason that, you could argue that, Spirit Stones perhaps isn't. That's not often, sort of a reliable combo. Because you're trading 2 cards for 1 card, this card plus whatever minion into 1. You'll probably get, you'll probably take something off the board. So you might get a 2 for 2. It's sort of in this situation where it could make a massive difference, but just holding it in your hand until a good play. And often the play doesn't make that much damage. Doesn't damage your opponent that much, I should say. I'm getting tired as well. I've been doing this for an hour. My voice is going. It's okay. It gets. Sometimes I don't even put it in to then subsequently get cut. But I think I should experiment with this more. The more I'm thinking about it, I'm asking myself, have I really tested this enough? The times that I've tested it, it hasn't been underwhelming. It's been okay, but the competition at 2. It's just, at 2, I'd rather have Troika Sect or Raid the Tombs or Born Again. I've already had this conversation basically. The competition at 1-2 that we've gone through so far. Synapse Overclock just is a good card that gets left behind. Troika Sect, I really like. Sometimes it's a massive difference maker. Reanimator, the deck list I'm talking about this time. Deck type hates this card. The fact that you can give a minion a permanent -3 is a massive deal. Bouncing artifacts. The fact that it's so versatile and it's so useful makes it really, really fantastic. In some of my decks, I use it. The jury's still out. It's so useful so often. There's so much competition, but somehow I cannot dismiss this card and say definitively, no, you absolutely need, other things in here. Even over stuff like Detained, I'd have at least 1 Born Again, but I wouldn't, if you said, would you rather have Troika Sect or Born Again? Well, that's not too difficult a question. Flamespar, 2 mana, 2 green gems already locks you out of a lot of your stuff if you're going dual colour. Even worse if you're going tricolour or higher. 3 mana to deal 2 damage to anything. It's sort of a win more card. If you've got the luxury of putting this down, you're not in trouble. But if yellow-green has the luxury of putting this down and it's not in trouble, in the early game, or putting this down in the late game really, so what? You're already winning. You don't need this. It's a luxury. This is an indulgent card that you might experiment with. or you know, in a massive ramp. There's so little ramp that you're not really going to get up to a massive amount of mana in the first place. Analyst. Oh yeah, I didn't actually talk about that, but of course it's 0-3 as well, so it's not lasting a long time. It's not doing an awful lot in most games. In the games where it does do an awful lot, it's because your opponent drew badly or messed up in a big way. It doesn't, you know, if this takes over the board and your opponent's putting stuff down, but you've got the mana to stay in control, it could generate massive card advantage because it's doing so much for you and it's hard for your opponent to get control back. But if you've already got control, you know, this is a luxury. This really is a luxury. 0-3 is pretty bad. It can't do much. And I'm saying that because we're moving on to 1-4. 1-4 for 3 mana is pretty terrible anyway. Divination 4 is great, but you don't tend to need that, especially in yellow-green, but just in general with green decks. Raid the Tombs is one of the best card draws in the game. You'd rather just draw 2 cards for 2 than Divination 4 and control which card you draw next. You'd rather just draw 50% of the cards that you just divined. And that's way more useful. 1-4 isn't affecting the board that much. It's okay, but Shop-Worn Bull is played because you've got the capability of drawing a card and then choosing something to put back. But it's also because it's a 2-5, and that's fantastic value. A 1-4 Divination 4 isn't great. You know, it's just not much of an impact on the board. Putting this down is pretty dead. Yeah, sort of like Singing Serpent style. Also a spell, so it goes into Spell Flux. Spell Flux loves this, of course, because you're throwing it down. Suddenly you've got 3 minions on board that Spell Flux can then give free attack to. But it can't do it on the same turn because the minions don't have rush. Yet again, you know, red. I mean, green-red is just so balanced. They seem to really balance each other out. But, you know, if you've got a Dashing Ringmaster Academy recruitment and you put a Spell Flux down earlier, suddenly you've got, you know, your cadets coming down and then they have rush. If you have a spell turn and you play 2 or 3 spells, that's an instant 9 damage very easily, and then they hang around, which is great. Baba Yaga's Den is pretty good. Like, it's so often good in the early game, and even in the late game, you know, they've got an Iku Terso. If you draw this, at least Iku is only dealing 4 damage to you that turn. As 3 drops go, it's fantastic, but as a mythic, you can't rely on it because you only get 1 copy of it. It's hard to dig for it. So I think it's a fantastic card. I think 2-6 for 3 are good stats. It's got Swift. There's so much to this. It's really good. The fact it fully heals can be really inconvenient for your opponent sometimes. There's sort of a Helm of Conscription, Baba Yaga's Den style deck that I played with for a little bit. The only issue is, again, competition. I mean, Baba Yaga's Den is next to Bella, and arguably Bella is a lot better than Baba Yaga's Den is. You know, Hopeless Necromantic, Leshy, Pillage. We're not even talking about other colours or yellow-green. I mean, so help me, yellow-green has Meso at the 3 spot. And if you draw this late game, Iku's only doing 4. But if you draw Meso late game, Iku's stunned for a turn. Or whatever, you know, I mean, even stuff that, you know, just about every, like, Meso is sort of like a more consistent play. If you're going to consistently try and climb with a deck and you needed something that was just going to give you constant performance, just constant value over and over, Meso is the card, even though Baba Yaga's Den is arguably better. Baba Yaga's Den is better more of the time, but can't consistently give you what yellow-green needs, which is the ability to get to its late game super comfortably, but also be capable of playing a role in that late game. Sort of. It's still a fantastic card, but, you know, it sounds stupid. If this wasn't a mythic, I think, you know, having 3 copies of this would be better than having Meso Libre. But you're having 1 copy of this and then 2 Meso Libres or something. You know, 3 Meso Libres. I don't know. It's just, I'm trying to work with it. But it's been underwhelming. Somehow it should be amazing. I'm still working my way through this one. It's good. There are just other cards, other considerations for free. Bella, when I first started recording for Cruel TK, I was thinking about cutting Bella because I was like, well, 3 green gems is so much in a dual colour deck, and especially when I was experimenting with splashes. And I really don't know about this. 2/4 for free, the stats are okay. Of course she can stun, but it's just so awkward to get her out that maybe there's something that I can just consistently get out and gives me value more, you know, more easily, more efficiently, more cheaply in terms of gem cost. 3 gems on Bella means I can't throw Bella down on turn 8, you know, and then burn. No, I didn't say that right, did I? Well, no, because of course Collarbock ramp. I did say that. That happens a lot. You know, putting Bella down and then burning to get up to 9 mana. With Collarbock ramping once. If you're playing 3 Collarbocks, then most of the time you'd have ramped at least once. You know, and then putting twins down. I've actually lost my train of thought. Am I getting really, really tired? Oh, I think I must be. Yeah, I mean the fact that Bella is, you know, 3 green gems, not twins. Did not mean twins. I'm not even sure if I meant 6. Traitorous Murmur, perhaps. You can't Traitorous Murmur and Bella in the same turn. Is where I was going with that, sort of. But I went a long way. I think I need to take a quick break. Alright, let's try and do this. But honestly, I was extremely wrong. I very quickly found out in Cruel TK within 2, 3, 4 matches. In the same way that Meso Libre gives you so much, whether it's early game, late game, whenever, she controls so much of the board. And she's so useful in so many situations. She does so much. You can't rate a 10 out of 10 because 3 mana, 3 green gems is so demanding. You know, a 10 out of 10, it needs to be something that comes out really easily and gives you such incredible value. If it's on the board, Bella tends to give you incredible value because you can immediately come down and stun something. She's using Spell Flux too, of course, to make spells super easy to cast. You know, even if your opponent will probably cast a spell over the 3 turns. So this free energy that she comes down with is more likely that she'll stun something once or twice. But you know, stunning perfect grade once or twice is amazing value for a 3 mana. You can't complain about that. Gemhold Dwarf. I haven't used it a lot, so I don't really want to say too much. 3/4 seems pretty good. Refresh Your Gems also seems interesting. I haven't seen it yet. I haven't seen anyone use it. So, jury's out on that one. Hope is Necromantic. In Reanimated decks, it's a 4 of. It's a bit more controversial in decks outside of that. I won't talk too much about Reanimated because it's just, you know, it's so clear. There's so few ways of recursion out of the Boneyard. And Reanimator, Disc of Sicardi Reanimated decks revolve around Hopeless Necromantic. I'll just talk about Necromantic in terms of its value overall across decks. Yeah, Jury's still out. You could say, you know, it's a 3 mana 2/3, but the stats of whatever is replaced, you know, for 3 mana you're getting the 2/3 plus whatever minion comes out of the Boneyard. So I actually think in terms of value, Hopeless Necromantic's amazing. Not exactly card advantage, but in terms of bringing weapons back to the match, you know, also fantastic. I suppose that's tempo advantage. Still learning these things. I've only been playing for a month and a half. Trying to learn as much as possible, as quickly as possible. So I think for free money, you get an awful lot out of Necromantic. I really like her, and I've tried using her in my decks outside of Reanimator. I think putting Necromantic on a Bald Mountain late game, when there's something that you really need to get out of your Bald Mountain, you really need to get something out of your Boneyard, is one of the better plays you can make if your opponent's got no minions in area. It demands so many resources. You got to get rid of the Necromantic, then you got to get rid of whatever replaces the Necromantic. You're not supposed to use it with Raid the Tombs too much, or you're supposed to use a lot of Raid the Tombs so that all the crap at the bottom of your Boneyard disappears, and she actually brings up something decent for late game. That's sort of a weird. So basically, don't go halfway. You gotta go all the way with her. Regen 2, like for a card slot, this is hard to justify. You know, first you put this down, and it doesn't actually do anything on its own, so that's useless. Then you need to put a minion on it, so you know, add that cost, and then you need to have minions that have appreciable health. That Regen 2 is going to keep your board healthy. You know. That doesn't happen too often. Like, Regen 2 isn't doing anything all that amazing enough of the time. I suppose it allows you to be more assertive on your turn and to do, you know, create value. But it requires a lot of conditions. You know, you need to put this down, you need to put a minion on top of it, and then you need to have minions on the board. We sound like basic, but, you know, it's like you have other cards that offer you value straight away. Is it fair to use Bella? I mean, but you know, like so many of these cards just hit the board, and that's all they need. They need themselves. Bella, if it hits the board, is already going to work. Doesn't require other minions around it. It doesn't require a big board or your minions to be damaged or have health or whatever. Led Astray, you know. I quite like it. I normally play one copy. I'm not sure what else to say about the card. I play the one copy because almost inevitably there's a point in the match where Led Astray is really incredibly useful. It doesn't feel great to bounce a collar block, but if you manage to just rope a collar block around and your opponent's super happy, you know, it's at 5-6 energy, and then you Led Astray, you've just gotten rid of it, which is extremely good. Hua hits the field. Led Astray means you don't have to deal with that ramping. And yellow-green isn't going to be able to just quickly rush in and destroy a Hua, so that's excellent. Things like that. Also, if you misanthropia the board and you know your Iku, something like that, you can Led Astray your own Iku Terso once it's, you know, the Blight 3 has taken it down to 1 health, something like that. Same with all of your bombs, really. And then, of course, you can use them at a later time. You lose some card advantage, but if it's getting to late game, you only got 7, 8, 9, 10 cards left in the deck, and the chance of getting that bomb next turn is high enough. I think is okay because you're already generating such advantage, you know, with 2-for-1s, 3-for-1s with Sapo and so on. Leshy is fantastic. Sort of, you know, your opponent is throwing down aggro cards, trying to control the board, trying to take you down quickly before you can really turn the corner and start applying your will to the board. Leshy doesn't mind that because, of course, he'll come down. And the more minions that your opponent has on the board and the more trouble you're in, the stronger Leshy is. If you're in trouble and you know, and your opponent's only got 1 or 2 minions, he's not great, but that's fine. Like, in so much, if you're not in trouble, then Leshy isn't great, but if you're in massive trouble, Leshy's fantastic. And you know, that's sort of okay, but eventually it gets cut just because there are things at 3 which are slightly better, or things that you need. In 40 card slots, I've tried using it. I think Baba Yaga's Den is useful more often because people just sort of move things away from Leshy. Aggro can still move around him, and eventually they'll just Gigantomachia, you know, they'll get around Leshy somehow. But for all that, I think he's a fantastic card. Yellow-green is in trouble in the early game in most matchups. The Leshy has value. It's just trying to get him squeezed into those 40 slots, which is difficult. Night Hag, I thought it'd be better than Meso Libre because of the 4 health. Definitely not. It's definitely worse than Meso, in my opinion. The problem is that Meso can come down and stun something, and that's it. Like, it doesn't matter what happens to Meso. Meso can die, but you still got that stun for a turn. You still got value out of Meso Libre. Night Hag comes down, and you know, a Dark Passenger, or you know, in say Peach of Cicadia, Kish will put down a Racer in Shadow with a Pike on a Slayer 1 turn when the disc is at day, and destroy the Night Hag. It's the fact that a minion in the opposite lane is stunned while Night Hag is in play, and then as soon as Night Hag leaves, it's not stunned anymore. It's so poor. You know, you can suppress it, you can just destroy Night Hag, and it's like it didn't stun anything ever. It demands that your opponent uses resources on it, but if your opponent uses resources on it, the actual gain from Night Hag isn't great. It's just not that good. Pillage is a fantastic card. Sometimes I struggle to put it in, but most of the time when it's in the deck, it's fun. You know, it's really good. Again, the fact that it's a mythic though, because it's good, is a card that you desperately need at certain times. But the fact that it's a mythic and you only get 1 copy of it makes it so much less valuable. Because against Reanimator, you're dying to have Pillage in your opening hand, and you know they put that Indrik Beast to the bottom, whatever it is, you Pillage, and Reanimator has just been hamstrung. You know, massive deal. Your opponent's doing Fires of Creation, and suddenly they've put down a No Llama Ring. Being able to steal a No Llama Ring is effectively a 2 for, you know, that's fantastic. They've now lost No Llama Ring, and you've gained No Llama Ring. Pillage gives you so much. Like, it's a great tempo play. It's just really good. But you need to be able to rely on consistent value from your cards. Pillage is not really good the entire match. There are specific points in the match that you really want Pillage, and then the other 70-80% of the match, you know, Pillage is good. You could still make nice plays with it, but it's not the same. And the fact that you only get 1 copy of it, and we don't have tutor effects in the game, it's just sort of a backbreaker for this card. It's so good. I tried to put it in my decks, but the fact you can only have 1 copy and can't reliably have it at the key moments when you really want to use it over other cards that give you consistent value for the entire match makes it hard to justify, because you're just relying on RNG. That doesn't feel like the way to climb to me. Even when it's not like a key moment in the match when you really desperately want to use it, you can still get value out of it. So often you get a lot of value out of Pillage. But I'm just talking about, you're not putting it in the deck for sort of like little value gains throughout the match. You're putting it in because you're thinking, wow, well this really annoys Fires of Creation. This sets them back quite a bit. This really just increases the win percentage against Reanimator if I can get this off. You know, it's sort of like a big play. It's a vital play. That's what you want Pillage for most of the time. And somehow in 40 cards, this doesn't end up in the deck eventually, because I can't reliably use it and know what I'm getting. Serenity, I haven't played a lot of this because Yellow-green already has pretty stringent gem costs. It rewards you playing sort of mono green or a heavy green splash. In yellow-green, of course, though, I mean, Sapo needs 3, Twins need 3, you know, and Short Stag and Bella on the other end also need 3 green gems, so this is difficult to use. Other people have used it against me, and yeah, 3 mana, a 2/3 for 3 mana, not great stats, but they're okay stats for the ability to immediately hit the board in that type of deck and make a minion almost useless. Like, if you know, at turn 3, what minions, you know, on turn 1 to 3 have 4 strength? You know, like this basically makes a minion have 0 attack, and you know, it sort of hits the board. It's one of the most valuable things about card is when, you know, it can hit the board, immediately do something. But at the same time, I mean, on turn 3, you're not going to have 3 green gems. So that was a terrible example. I am a fool. I suppose you could say that it has sort of early game threat where it demands resources, but also late game it has some value as well. Making IQ a 7/10 is value out of a free drop. You know, during this late game, allows you to hang in there. It's quite useful. I think there are decks where this is very, very good, but it just demands you to go heavier green than most decks are comfortable with. Green-red doesn't like to go this far green most of the time. Spellflux does. Spellflux decks are more sort of like where witches are anyway in terms of tribals. Yellow-green doesn't like it. Even green-purple doesn't like it. 3/3 for free. Agile Regen 1 seems nice, but honestly the Agile and the Regen 1 don't come into effect that much, in which case you get 3/3 for free, which is just okay stats really. Like, there are so many ways of taking it off. Very rarely do you put this down, and because it can't immediately attack, your opponent isn't then capable of taking this out, in which case the Agile and the Regen 1 are useless, or your opponent makes the informed decision that they can take 3 damage because they're outracing you in other areas of the field. It's definitely not, you know, for all of these, definitely not. Sky Ranger, another witch, but I mean, of course, the fact that this actually can come down on turn 3 and have, you know, Agile and Rush. Super valuable. The fact that it has the Agile is surprisingly useful. It forces you into mono green, so you don't get to play it that much. But stuff like Jaded Courtier, or even, you know, even in green, all the stuff like House Elf and Moth Mara, you know, Bella, you know, like Sky Ranger can hit the board and immediately get to them. 3 damage isn't enough to kill Bella. Bella's very rarely at the 4, and at least you deal the 3. And that can finish something off. It's really good sort of like, I don't want to say spot removal, but it's ping removal. You can just choose anything for 3 mana. It's 3 damage to anything on the board, which is valuable enough. It also has Lurker, so if you're trying to ping off a House Elf, you know, it has the 2 health that make that 1/2 stat line so terrible. This is sort of one of the big reasons to play Fang Alpha 9. It gets buffed by other canines. It also is great tech, not just for canines, but just in general. This is one of the few canines that you might be able to play outside of canines. I've been trying to play it outside of canines in sort of that overkill fashion, that sort of deck tech fashion, where you throw Abomination down, and then if you put a point man next to it, Abomination gets overrun. You don't care about the attack, but just the ability to give your Sapo or your Abomination overrun, while also being a body that you can put on the field. You know, 2/3 for free isn't great, but in Fang Alpha 9, it's at least a 3/4 that's also given something else 1 attack and overrun. And if that's a K9 too, and they're all, you know, they're buffing each other. I think that Fang Alpha 9 if Point Man was taken out of the game, Fang Alpha 9 just wouldn't be viable at all. This is the big card. It's so useful. Volkov, a bit too situational. I can see why it's in Fang Alpha 9 because there are only so many K9 soldiers, and definitely when you bring that horn down and there's something crappy next to a veteran, and the 4 health means that crappy means anything that's 3 health or less. Being able to hit the horn and suddenly it becomes a 5. Well, I mean, basically it's a 5-1. If it takes 3 damage, then it's a 5-1. So you're removing 1 minion, and then it's got 5 damage, plus whatever the rest of the pack does. It's part of what makes horn turns so dangerous for your opponent. It is situational and slow though. It's okay. It's not the reason to play K9s though. It's not the reason to play Fang Alpha 9 in the way that Point Man. If you look at them, Point Man definitely deserves the extra green gem cost. Because even though, Veteran has a 3-4 and Point Man has a 2-3, in Fang Alpha 9, this gets, this is actually a 3-4 as well. Because it gets +1/+1 for each adjacent K9. So in the very least, it's a 3-4, but you're getting 4-4 of stats because it also gives the +1 attack to whatever's next to it. And I'm only assuming there's 1 K9 next to it. So this is sort of one of the worst case scenarios. You've only got a Pack Trooper or something. But the Pack Trooper, of course, gets buffed as well. So not even a Pack Trooper, but, I mean, a Volkov veteran, I suppose. Point Man just does so much more. It's so flexible. It's sort of a tech. You could sort of play it outside of K9s, arguably, as a bit of tech against certain deck types. Veteran, there's only so many K9s. Avenging Alpha, getting a 6/6 for 4 is great value. But at the end of the day, you want something that consistently comes down and gives you, I don't want to say something, but basically a 4/4 for 4 is terrible. It's just a 4/4 for 4 with blank text, or it's a 6/6 for 4, but a minion was destroyed. And Fang Alpha 9 really is trying to keep the pack together. So Avenging Alpha is sort of anti-synergistic with Fang Alpha 9. It's a nice idea, but it requires minions to be on the board that then get cleared in order to then put Avenging Alpha down. But if minions are getting cleared out and Avenging Alpha comes down, then they just sort of, wherever you put it down, they just put a crappy chump blocker in front of it. It doesn't have overrun or anything, and they just ignore it in a way. And because they've been clearing out minions, they have board control. Wherever this goes, they've got the rest of the board. They can just keep this occupied with some rubbish. Board mounting. You have to have at least 1 copy in almost any deck that is green. The ability to just bring spells back from the boneyard and use them all over again. So much hand advantage. In terms of cards like Misanthropia or Traitorous Murmur, tempo advantage too. Anything that it's sort of greedy, but in certain matchups, this is necessary. This is so incredibly important to have. The ability to bring back even a Raid the Tombs or a Revelation, because you need to dig desperately for that last thing to hold your opponent off. Massive deal. So much value. The ability to create so much tempo. The ability the ability to use your boneyard as that second hand that I was sort of referring to and talking about Dora and stuff, and watching Nitzun's channel. It quite literally is using the boneyard as a hand, just an easy hand that's got 10-15 cards in it. You just pick whatever is the perfect tool. It becomes your own toolbox. You just pick the perfect spell and bring that out. Bog Basilisk. The 1 damage is the real problem here, because a lot of the stuff that you really want to stun with Bog Basilisk has armor 1 or armor 2, such as perfect grade, or they destroy a 1/6 instantly. A 1/6 for 4, maybe it can stun. Basically it can stun something for a turn. But Meso Libre can do that at 3, and is a 3/3 that might be able to trade get you a 2 for 1, and it's guaranteed to get you the stun. Basilisk still needs something to crash into it, or it still needs to attack something, which isn't, is more conditions and it's slower. Meso Libre just gives you a stun, easily. So I don't really like this card. Your opponent can play around it. It can get stunned by a Meso Libre, or your opponent manages to move their Rico away, stuff like that. It's not that much. Boneyard Abomination. I think any yellow-green really should be playing Boneyard Abomination. Yellow is too much of a control colour. You go through too much of your deck not to have a Boneyard Abomination around. 4 mana plus Volition, 6 mana it's just one of the most common ways of winning a match. It's yellow-green. It's Boneyard Abomination. Throw it down. Volition. 12, 15 damage. Easy peasy. Sometimes you go into Orange Splash and even Boneyard Abomination plus Volition for 6. Then Dire Benediction is 9. 9 mana is so easily achievable, and you've just dealt 20, 30 damage. Finished the match. Dire Benediction doesn't even require you to, get through your opponent. Dire Benediction just jumps. So your opponent could cover the entire board. You could put down a Boneyard Abomination at the end of the game. Boneyards are full, Abominations at 20, Dire Benediction, and your opponent just takes 20 damage. This is a massive issue, and it's one of those threats and a clear message that if another deck doesn't shut you down soon enough, you just finish the game. This is sort of your get out of jail free card. It's your everything. You're in trouble when you put down your Boneyard Abomination and you're not finishing the game with it. That's when your opponent's really got you on the back foot. But if aggro is just going through all your monsters, and the best you can do is throw this down on 4 because you're just trying to buy as much time as you possibly can, you're in massive trouble and your life is dropping super quick. So you throw down this as a 4/4, 5/5. That's still okay. If that's what you need to do against aggro, that's what you need to do. It's fantastic. For 4, I don't know if it should be 4 mana, because the way it finishes is just violent. It's so good. It's amazing. Focus Frenzy is just a really rubbishy, slow Volition a lot of the time. A minion, a minion has to already be on the board or have rush, and it has to have 3 or more health. And effectively, because it has to have 3 or more health, it needs to have a clear avenue of attack. And because of the focus 1, you'd like the avenue, you'd like it to attack straight in front of it as well, of course. But that requires 2 turns, and there are other ways that you could just as easily, in those 2 turns, you could just as easily put Iku down that first turn, and then the second turn, attack with Iku, and then Volition it. And that would be 2 mana cheaper and 1 gem cheaper, although in a different colour. And, of course, because Iku has Overrun as well. And you're effectively getting the same thing. Focus Frenzy isn't that great. Volition is so flexible compared to this. You can't have an Abomination Focus Frenzy deck. That's way too slow. You can't leave Abomination on the field unless it's finishing something, or it's doing something really vital, like your opponent has an artifact at 9 health. Sometimes you might Abomination early, just to get that artifact out of the way, because it is just killing you like a Shroud of the Pit. Oh, we almost... Oh, my throat is going really badly. Gamian, yeah. 4/4 for 4, but Agile Divination 2. It's hard to complain. You get a lot for this card. It's really good for 4. The only problem is that there's a lot of competition, not at the 4, but above and below. And green sort of uses its lower either to ramp up or for massive synergy, and it's vital. And then it uses its upper half, and its upper half are such bombs that a lot of the time green doesn't really invest in the mid-range too much. Green is a very balanced colour that's capable of going mid-range for once, but you don't really use Gamion too much. Green, red, dashing. Ringmaster likes this card because of the 4 strength. Agile means that if you've got a Ringmaster on the field, Gamion can come down and just attack whatever you like, go face. Or Ringmaster plus Gamion is 7 mana just for an easy 4 damage. You know, the Divination 2 is good in aggro decks that don't have the luxury of having a lot of card draw in them to try and just keep you getting the exact cards that you need to finish the game. It has a lot. It's sort of an aggro card in green. It's okay. I like it, but I mean yellow green doesn't really need it. You look at the card and you're thinking, well, beneath it, I'm more interested in Collar Box, Wake the Bones, stuns, you know, stuff like Bella, ways of keeping me in the game. And in terms of, you know, having an actual body, like 4/4 is okay, but you know, I'm 2-3 turns off putting down real issues for my own, like making real problems. This is sort of just a card that is difficult to get rid of and is sort of convenient, but doesn't sort of grab you and be like, I have to be in this deck. It is very neat with Dashing Ringmaster though. Shroud of the Pit, oh my word, like I was talking about Spirit decks earlier. A large part of Spirit decks revolve around the fact that Shroud of the Pit and Racer in Shadow. I'll talk about Racer really quickly, just because of this, but just the ability to recur your Racer over and over and over again with Shroud of the Pit is so you can get so much value out of Shroud of the Pit. I did mention while talking about Wake the Bones, because Wake the Bones is 1 mana, it's super cheap. You want to use it to get your Riku Terso out, and that's why Wake the Bones is normally in, not Shroud of the Pit. Shroud of the Pit is 4 mana, but then you spend another mana just to get something out. And it has to have the mana cost equal to your energy. So when Shroud of the Pit first comes down, it's 5 mana basically. So 5 mana Wake the Bones, and it can only get out something that's 4 mana or less. So it's not great. It's great in specific decks, but the decks it's great in are the decks that sort of are almost the opposite of the decks that Wake the Bones are great in. This is great in decks that use stuff like Racer and Shadow. Low cost, but high value, super useful minions that are going to allow you to keep trading well, keep accumulating value and card advantage, hand advantage. In a Void, not talking about practicality, but just in terms of in theory, I don't like this card. Not just in terms of Wake the Bones, in general, I don't like this card. Because what I really like, you know, what I really want to bring out are my bombs. You know, I want to bring out, you know, my twins and my Sapo, my Zolea, stuff like that. But if I'm getting up to 7 or 8 mana and I can do that with Shroud of the Pit, I'm already winning the match, you know. It's not quite like, this is sort of a dead turn in that respect, you know. 4 mana and then spending another mana to get a minion back to your hand. Nothing's happened on the board though. You spent 5 mana so far, nothing's happened on the board. So it has to be in decks that can then give you some breathing space. Yellow green doesn't. If you've got the breathing space to use Shroud of the Pit and get out one of those bombs that you really enjoy using and are part of your win conditions, really, is your ability to just extract so much value, then the Shroud of the Pit is just unnecessary. It's just an indulgence, really. You're already winning. You don't need this. It's really good in Fires of Creation. Because Fires of Creation often has to go 3, 4, or 5 colours anyway, because there are only so many good artifacts. You have to go multiple colours. They also tend to go Racer and Shadow very easily. Shroud of the Pit loves Racer and Shadow. There are quite a lot of the things that Shroud of the Pit. There's about anything that is 1 or 2 mana that Shroud of the Pit can just keep, sort of bringing back to your hand. You can keep using just to generate value, get things off the board, just like so many different ways. Very much opposite Wake the Bones in that respect, though. If you want to get out big things, Wake the Bones. If you want to get out small things, Shroud of the Pit. The Invisible City. No one's played it against me. I don't want to say anything about it without actually playing it or actually seeing it played quite a few times. An extra card each turn. No, this is conditional card draw. I don't think it's that great. Wendish Giant. 5/5 for 4 are good stats, but I already talked about this in the yellow individual cards evaluation, where there's no overrun on this. There are no keywords. Someone could just put a 0/1 in front of it all day. It could do nothing. It's okay. It's not. Well, that's wrong. That's being far too nice. It's not okay. 5/5 are nice stats for 4 mana, but there's just nothing on this. When you compare it to a Gamayan, where you're losing 1 in attack and health, but you have Agile and you have Divination too. So much more value. I suppose it's sort of justifying that with the extra gem. But looking at, this is laughable. Like Boneyard Abomination, even if you used it early, has more than 5/5. So in terms of value for 4 mana, Shroud of the Pit will generate more value if it's that sort of deck. Bald Mountain, the things at 4. Wendish Giant doesn't make sense. It doesn't do anything at 4. It's just laughable. Volkov's right underneath it, right? They're both 5/5. Volkov costs 1 mana more and 1 gem more. But you get armor 1 and overrun. Where this can just be chumped. It's not that great. Zmei Hydra. In basic yellow green, it's okay in so much as it forces your opponent to use resources on it. They can't just leave it around because it'll get stronger and stronger and stronger. But it's not great as well. 4/5 isn't that tough to get rid of, and is also not a game winner on its own. A 4/5 isn't going to win the game on its own, and if your opponent lets it ramp up to the point that this becomes a threat, maybe they deserve to lose the game. Or maybe you're an incredible player, that somehow manages to get a non-immortal 4/5 up to incredible heights. But in Dashing Ringmaster or Frecky Sidecar, suddenly this card becomes so good. Dashing Ringmaster, Zmei Hydra, 4 strength is right at the top of that Dashing Ringmaster restriction. Bring it in, smash it into something. Your opponent instantly has to remove it, or it becomes a 6/7. And you get to choose when that happens. You get to take the initiative. Zmei Hydra with Rush puts your opponent into red alert. That's panic mode. Okay, well, now I'm in trouble. So yeah, in terms of Ringmaster or Frecky Sidecar, things like that. Anyway, I've given it Rush. This is a big deal. Bellavode. Bellavode is amazing, but it doesn't stop Overrun. So people have used Bellavode against me, and I can't get their minions off the field. But Iku, just for example, having Iku on the field, he's still holding the thing in front of him down, even if he only deals 1 damage to it. He's a 10/10, and he's still dealing 7/8 damage to my opponent. Volition, another 7/8. It's okay. It's hard to get things off the board, but Misanthropia sort of. You've got Misanthropia in hand. They put down Belvode, And then you're like, okay, well, you know, like, you're going to struggle to put things on it because the things that are on it take full damage. And I've got the bombs. I just have to put my bombs near it. And even if there's something on it and I'm struggling to get rid of your board because it's only taking 1 damage at a time, I can just misanthrope you whenever I like, because your face still takes maximum damage. Over, like, it's just, I don't. As mythics go, this is quite poor, or at least it is quite poor for yellow-green. Again, you know, if I was playing other decks, maybe it'd be amazing, or maybe this would be really inconvenient to go against. But when I'm playing yellow-green, someone puts down Bellavode. We're reaching the end game. I've got so much overrun, so many destruction effects. If I've got Tangle Skin, that's also deadly effects that I've got going all over the place. So hitting for 1 damage is all I need to get rid of something. It's okay. Crochet is a little bit too expensive. You know, all of these effects are amazing. You know, yet again, Dashing Ringmaster loves Crochet. 4 strength, but deadly. You can rush it in, instantly kill something. Super amazing. And then he comes back, keeps coming back. You lose health though, and 4/4 isn't that difficult to get off the field or to mess around with. Dashing Ringmaster at least allows you to be assertive with it. Yeah, 4/4 for 5 mana. You know, it's okay. With Ringmaster, it becomes a lot better. Ravenous She. 5/5 for 5. It can be super inconvenient, but the problem is that its ability requires someone to actually attack into it. Your opponent, you know, like, you can't make your opponent attack into this as a general rule. And there are ways of removing it. And if they put, you know, their 5/5 in front of it, and there's a stalemate, you know, like, what has that achieved? Have you done anything with this card? How exactly is this card specifically generating value? It doesn't have overrun, so you can chump block it. If your opponent just puts something in front of it, nothing's happening. It's a spirit, but it's a very expensive spirit, so, you know, sort of Corrupt Prayer Wheel style decks aren't really looking at this. No, not really, especially not considering all the 5 drops. Even stuff, there's stuff below it that's cheaper that does more than this does. Having effects that require your opponent to attack into you, you know, very reactive. I don't really like it. Oh, sort of in the way that I don't like, is it Phalanx Squadron? Can't remember. Might as well check this while I'm here. I think it is. But yeah, I mean, basically the argument is exactly the same. Security Phalanx, where this card is nice, but it's just sitting around waiting for your opponent to attack into it. That's not great. That's not what you want at all. Sovereign Architect. It's sort of like Vedma Flamespar, where it's indulgent, it's a luxury. If you could control the board with it, it could be amazing, but you're not going to get up to so much mana as a general rule that this is really going to create sort of value over and over and over again. You know, it's that you can already get, you know, 2 or 3-fold from things further down the list. You know, I mean, using its ability once, 8 mana for, you know, a 2/6 and a 2/2. So what are you getting? For 8 mana, you're getting 4/8 of stats. You know, I suppose you could include the agile in there. But, you know, for 8, what? It's sort of like Bob. You know, you're looking at it and it's like, okay, for 8 mana, what am I getting? I'm getting 2 units that equal 4/8. Like, that's not great. You can keep using the ability, but I mean, using 3 mana for a 2/2. The idea, of course, is sort of like hand advantage, card advantage. It's allowing you to keep your options in your hand while you create chump blockers. Volkov is an excellent card. I'm trying to find a way of putting it in decks. It's not working because everything that I put in above it is 10 out of 10. It's just, this is amazing. Like, for 5 mana, you get a 5/5 arm 1 overrun. It's so great. I can understand why Yoritomo Malay made it to champion with this sort of low key, low cost. I don't want to say Volkov heavy deck, but Volkov heavy was in there, and he loves the card, and I can understand why. It's amazing. It's so hard to justify in the deck when the things above it, Traitorous Murmur, Short Stag, Iku Terso. These are like these are just god, like this is just 10 out of 10. This is just, you know, it's so amazing. But when I'm reaching 5, 6, 7, 8 mana in yellow green, and I've got Misanthropias, Sappos, the Twins, this doesn't make it in, but it's a great card. Alkanost, you know, 6/6 for 6 mana but 3 green gems. It's sort of nice in so much as sacrificing a unit gets around Immortal. So if you can stun something and then Alkanost, I'll just say Alkanost it, you know what I mean? Like, and the same with the Berserker Frenzy. You know, if you Berserker Frenzy something and then stun it, it just kills itself. That's the end of it. End of problem. But that's a lot of setup. It can get rid of something big. But I could just put some, like, this is what I've been talking about this whole time with yellow green though. The standard response to someone putting down something big is going, okay, well, Traitorous Murmur, now it's mine. Or, oh, that's a lot of stats. Short Stag, you can only deal 3 damage to me. So you lose. You lose. Sable Wing 0 is getting buffed slightly. And it's going to be amazing. You know, this is going to be the finisher eventually. If we do get a spell path, but just in general, spell flux decks, you know, like this card. I've never lost to a spell flux deck, which I suppose is jinxing it. But Sable Wing 0, as far as I'm concerned, with how the state of the game is a worse abomination. You know, like you could, you know, you'd need this to come down at 6. I'm talking about sort of like a 1-turn kill, stuff like that. Because are you really, like, is your opponent really going to let you put this down on the board and then, like, we're talking late game. If your opponent doesn't have the answer to this, then they don't have the answer to Short Stag or Iku Terso either. They don't. They just don't have it. In which case, 0 isn't really needed. Its main worth is in that you can throw it down, cast some spells, including Volition. Volition turns it into an 8/8. You know, but you know, already Volition is turning it into an 8/8 for 8 mana. That's the problem. Then you might be able to cast, you know, another spell or two, and it becomes a 10/10 or a 12/12. Volition it just to finish and deal like 12-14 damage. But that is really like 9, 10, 11 mana. It's already 6 mana plus the Volition. You know, 8/8 for 8 with Rush is great. It's a finisher, but you know, Abomination tends to come down, and it's a 15/15 for 4 mana. If we're talking late game, and we have to be talking late game with something like this. Because, you know, if we're talking sort of mid game, it could come down. If your opponent can't deal with it, then I don't want to say they deserve to lose, but you can see it coming, right? It's slow. You can see what's going to happen. You already know what your opponent's going to do. If you're incapable of getting rid of the 0, then you need to look at the deck. You need to look at the way you play, look at the replay. You need to consider if there are alternative ways. Did you just sort of get screwed by RNG? But that's not really due to 0. Like if you got screwed by RNG to that degree that, you know, they managed to make everything work out great and they hit you on that second turn for 12/12. Yeah, I mean, you know, if you put down, you know, if they didn't have the answer to this, they don't have the answer to this. And with Iku, you know, you could use Iku Terso, and even if something's in the way, if you're just trying to finish with that last bit of damage, because Iku has Overrun, you can just throw this in front of something, Volition it. That's 9 mana in 2 different colours. 9 mana, 3 gems with the Overrun. That's 7, 8, 9 damage. It's already a 10/10. It doesn't need much more. For 1 mana more and 1 gem less, you get 4 more strength, 4 more health, overrun. You know, and it can hold down a fatty if it has to, which sometimes it really needs to do. IQ is just embarrassing, this thing, right now. In a Spell Flux combo deck, yeah, it's great. Right now, Spell Flux combo is tier 3 or 4 for a reason. This just doesn't come off looking so great. Traitorous Murmur, not much I don't think much needs to be said. I think I already understand that this card is great. I don't think anyone would argue that this card is not great. It's basically, you take your opponent's most valuable minion. So it's already a 1-for-1. You've used one card to get rid of one of their cards, but now it's also given you a card. Effectively, you've destroyed that minion and then made that minion as a copy. Oh, I don't know. I've made that more confusing than it has to be. But effectively, Traitorous Murmur is always at least a 2-1. You destroy a minion and you get a minion on your side of the field that's the best minion that your opponent has. Your opponent then, because the minion is presumably great, needs to get rid of it. It's a bomb, you know, it's a threat. They need to then divert resources to get rid of it. So it becomes, you know, a 2-for-1, 3-for-1, 4-for-1. They have to get rid of that minion. Traitorous Murmur is a massive tempo swing, massive value. It's incredible. Perhaps one of the best cards in the game. Maybe the best card in the game. I didn't like saying in the yellow evaluations that Sapo was the best spot removal in the game, because spot removal at 7 mana is too expensive to get to really be like a 10 out of 10. But Traitorous Murmur at 6, you know, there are things that struggle. You know, there are things where it's useless, like some sort of wide weenie style deck. But it is just in so many matchups. This is absurd. So many matchups. This is one of the primary reasons to play green. Vilya is surrounded by absolute beasts. I mean, quite literally beasts. Like, you know, like they're actual beasts. But it outclasses them in Dashing Ringmaster. I've been saying Dashing Ringmaster a lot, but right now Green Red is sort of a thing that everyone's playing. Is sort of meta. Aero Bear has just created an article, which has written an article on Red Green. So it's sort of it's sort of meta right now. It's sort of the in thing to think about. But yeah, Dashing Ringmaster, absolutely loves this card. You know, it comes down 4 strength, so Dashing Ringmaster means it has Rush. It has Frenzy though, so that's 8 damage guaranteed. It has Swift, Blast 2. This comes down, and in that sort of deck, wow, this is actually better than Short Stag or Iku a lot of the time. Even Traitorous Murmur, you could argue, is better than in that sort of situation, because Frenzy, Blast 2, 8, like that is just, it can finish for 8 damage, it can clear out an entire side of the board. Because it has Swift, it can even clear out, you know, the board in front of it. Then you can move it over, and because it has Frenzy, it has that second attack, then attack again, clear out 4 squares, you know, if it's just weenie stuff. Or, you know, apart from that though, you know, I mean a 4-5 for 6, but it has the keywords. The keywords are why it's valuable. The fact that his stats are actually right on the money for Dashing Ringmaster. In that specific deck it's better. In most decks, of course, the stuff that it's surrounded by, like this top end, yellow-green control is so strong, because the top end of yellow just makes you sort of go, oh my word, like this stuff is crazy. And the top end of green is the same, like oh my word. Like, we're getting into it, like Traitorous Murmur, now Short Stag. You know, 8-8 overrun for 7 mana is already, like, just 8-8 for 7 is sort of good. With the overrun, that's already great. The fact that you can get a minion from your boneyard to your hand, any minion. So if you used an Iku earlier, you get the minion. It's not even ephemeral. So You know, the fact that you then get the Awaken effect. Oh my word, for 7 mana, this is already, you know, that's already crazy. And then cannot take more than 3 damage in combat. You're just like throwing up your hands like this is for 7 mana. Like that, this is so ridiculous. This is an actual beast of a, like this is an absolute beast of a card. Traitorous Murmur and this are just, this is the top end. This is what I'm talking about. Like the top end of green is almost sick. Like, oh, someone, you know, like someone puts down something gigantic, even like a living mountain. You know, a living mountain is what, 12/12? Stag can't take more than 3 damage in combat, but the way it works is that Overrun still goes over your maximum. So if you put down Stag in front of Living Mountain, and Living Mountain attacks it, Living Mountain will deal 3 damage to the Stag, and because it's got 12 attack and Stag has 8 health, it'll still deal 4 damage to you. But of course the Stag deals 8 damage to the Mountain, and then on the Stag turn, you attack again into Living Mountain, and because the Mountain just took 8 damage, it's now at 4. So you deal 4 damage and you destroy the Living Mountain, and the Stag still has 2 health left over. And that's true. Like any big static minion, short Stag is just like, I do not care. This is just one of the big boys. Your opponent has to get rid of it. It's just way too much. It sort of helps you against Fires of Creation as well, because the ephemeral minions that you get from Fires of Creation just don't have the keywords to deal with this. Fires of Creation decks have to find alternate ways of dealing with short stack. You just stay forever. It's so good on Bay Many Fools. It can't take more than 3 damage in combat. Bay Many Fools regen 2, so it regens 2 health a turn. Oh, this is just, for 7 mana to get all of this is, oh, it's crazy. Like it could legitimately, you could sort of see an argument, even if it was 7 mana for a 6/6. And all of this, you know, Overrun, Awaken. That's still, oh, this is, it could lose stats and still be a sort of must pick. As it is, this is too good. This is too good. Like you'd have to have an amazing reason not to use. That's just way too good. Iku, most of the time I prefer short Stag to Iku. But having said, but both of them are just so, like, how can you argue against either of them? This is, for 7 mana, you get a 10/10 Overrun. That's what? It's just getting 10/10 worth of stats for 7. With the twins, you could argue, you know, you get for 6 mana, you get 9/9 worth of stats spread across 2 minions, and you know, you also get Overrun regen. That's fantastic. But I mean, Iku it's similar to short Stag. Like if your opponent puts down something big and beefy, putting short Stag in front of it. Absolutely destroy. Like, oh my word, like Iku as well though. Your opponent puts down a Celestial Dragon or anything with Agile, and the minion in the opposite lane is Defender and Immobile. So irrelevant. Like Agile doesn't matter. Anything like that. Iku can just lock something down. It's really good. If this comes down and they don't immediately deal with it, 10/10 worth of stats is too much. Way too, like this is overwhelming. The top half, specifically Traitorous Murmur, Short Stag, Iku, is so strong that even a card that I honestly think it's like an 8 out of 10, fantastic card like Volkov, you look at these 3 and you're just like, oh, like this is one of the primary reasons to play green. Just way too strong. Indrik Beast. What's going on with this? I mean, to be fair, like, you know, this is a mythic, so, you know, Indrik Beast, 8 mana, 9/7, you know, the stats aren't great, you know, warded, Overrun, so basically you're getting warded, but, you know, it comes off, is 1 mana more expensive, and you lose a strength and 3 health, and you also lose the ability to just lock down a fatty, or, you know, something that you just need to stay still for a little while. Also, yeah, I mean, even against Short Stag, you know, Short Stag is 8/8, this is 9/7, but it costs an extra mana. Doesn't get the fact, yeah, oh. Indrik Beast is okay, but I mean, it's not, I'd rather have, it sounds crazy to say this, I'd rather have a Volkov Heavy than an Indrik Beast, for sure. Recursionist, Spellflux, yes. In the expansion, I think Spellflux might get buffed, in which case Recursionist is going to be amazing. This is sort of like a late game bomb, a late game Spellflux bomb, where you could conceivably have a Spellflux Cauldron on the field, and then your turn 7 or 8, you throw down Recursionist for 2 mana, and then Overkill, Volition, whatever you want to do, but because you keep getting the spells back, you just go crazy. You can't leave it around for 2-3 turns. All your opponent has to do is play a spell. They might not play a spell by accident, but it's very rare that your opponent won't have a spell that will create value for them. And Recursionist is giving it extra value. You're effectively destroying, when they use a spell, this card gets destroyed and then a fresh copy gets put in their deck. It's just, that's not great. K9. So when it works, it really works. It just doesn't work enough of the time as a general rule. But yeah, I mean, it's hard to put this in Fang Alpha 9. It's hard to put this in K9 decks. A 2/2 for 3 mana isn't great, but because it gives adjacent minions +1/+1, you could argue it's a 3/3 for 3 or a 4/4 for 3. And the fact that you can just keep bringing it back to your hand, keep generating value, is pretty fantastic. But it does keep costing you mana every single time you do it. Sometimes it works. It doesn't work enough though. It's not consistent enough. You only get 2 in the deck. And you need minions around for it to buff. And you have to keep spending 3 mana to keep using it. And then a lot of the time you don't even get to use it. Plus 2/2 is very delicate. You can't just leave it on the field. I definitely wouldn't be able to justify it right now, but it might get better in the future. Plague Maidens. There is a yellow-green variation built around Plague Maidens. I mentioned it before, but I was talking about Rustland's Bite. Now we can see it properly though. The Lurker, you're not playing it for too much of this. You're not playing it for 0/3 either. You're playing it for the fact that for 1 mana, deal 1 damage to all minions and players. And this is not an action. This doesn't take up a utility action. It doesn't take up a main action. If this was on the field and it was turn 10 and you had 10 mana, you could just deal 10 damage to everything on the field and to both players. So if you have 11 health and your opponent has 10 health, that's it. That's done. That's the end of the game. It's so hard for anything to stay on the field around Plague Maidens. It can just clear the field. If your opponent is caught unaware, or it comes out of nowhere, or your opponent is playing aggro and suddenly it's turn 5 or 6 and Plague Maidens goes down on a Rustland's Bite and you use its ability 3 times, suddenly, all the Wings of Abaddon, all the Strigoi pups, everything is just been cleared. Aggro has just been set back to 0. And 5/6 is normally when it's trying to finish. And it has the Carnival and it's sort of looking for ways to just get in damage. And Plague Maidens just suddenly wipes the board. It's pretty good. It's pretty good. I'm not really in love with the YG version, but it does hold off aggro really well. And one of the weaknesses of YG control is definitely its early game. It's so incredibly weak. Plague Maiden sort of gives you attack. It's sort of like turn 4, 5, 6. Your Misanthropia hasn't turned up. You've got a Plague Maidens. Throw it down. 3 damage to everything on the field. Even against Valkyries, arguably, turn 4. You've managed to get enough in the way. You managed to deal a little bit of damage. Throwing down the Plague Maidens just to finish off a few Valkyries and turn that All-Father's Horn from lethal into just big damage. It can save your life. Plague Maidens is pretty good. It's surprisingly versatile as well. I really don't know why I unmaked mine. This was right at the beginning. I had to unmake it in order to make the Cruel Tech deck. I really needed that last bit of essence. I still think there is a deck that can be built around this. I think it's amazing. I also think there's a massive problem with the fact it doesn't have warded though. But putting this on Hekete's wheel and just stopping everything from attacking is so dominant and controlling. It also feels bad, so I don't know if they are going to give it too many synergistic cards, because I definitely don't think Rhino wants to create a viable deck around, you know, these sorts of cards where your opponent just can't do anything. Pretty amazing though. You can only imagine that sort of like Hekete's Wheel, Red Cliff's Revolutionary Totem, suddenly your opponent can't put any rush minions on. Well, all rush minions don't have rush. Plus, you know, having this on Hekete's Wheel means anything that's low is getting cleared. Anything big can't do anything. And because this is warded, it can only be banished. Then your opponent has to use... There are very finite amounts of banish effects in the game, basically. If your opponent uses a banish effect on this, it's a banish effect it can't then use on, you know, your bombs. It can't use a Nikki. But the type of deck that has Revolutionary Totem isn't really yellow-green control. And I don't think it's going to get buffed, or it should. I don't think it should have too many good cards. Just creating a deck out of this would be miserable to play against. I don't think Rhino wants that, so I don't know why they created this card in the first place. I mean, I've already talked about red-green a lot. If you had to pick two colours that sort of cover for each other and offer a fantastic balance, definitely these two. And Swaydenomicon. 2 mana is cheap, and 1 mana for this effect is way too cheap. I've already talked about using the Boneyard as a second hand and cards that allow you to do that. Swaydenomicon then takes it a step further. Now every burnt card that you've got in your deck is an option for you. And in green as well, where the Boneyard is so accessible to green, now burn cards in your deck are so accessible. This is just... watching Nitsa Hun's stream, he refers to like broken tier 0 decks. One of them was like Birthing Pod or something, but basically it was sort of like a toolbox deck where you could just tutor the exact perfect answer from your deck, and a combination of, you know, like having a red-green. Now this card just offers, like, it gives you the ability to burn your Armageddon Angel or your Ikki Turso or whatever you wanted. Like, I mean, Armageddon Angel, I'm going for 3 there. I'm very ambitious like that. But I mean, the effect itself doesn't require any gems, so just splashing into red is sort of okay. I don't know about splashing into green, but you could definitely splash into red. And suddenly you can just pull it out. If ever the situation's getting out of control, for 1 mana you can pull the answer out of your deck. You can always burn, and you don't have to worry about it. You can, again, I'm adding a third colour, but you could actually burn your Misanthropia early game and not have to worry. At any point, if you feel like, oh, well, this is getting out of control, like I'm actually starting to get worried, or, you know, they actually managed to get a few hits in, Swaydenomicons at 2, you pull out the Misanthropia from your deck that you burn, clear the board, everything's, you know, this is strong. This is really strong. I think this is way too cheap. I think it could be 2 mana to bring out in the first place, but 1 mana to pull any card that you've already burnt is just... This tutor effect is really strong. I can only assume it's going to get stronger too, with more cards coming into the game. Swaydenomicon's going to get stronger. Fated Firebird. I like this card. You sort of get value out of it, but 4 mana, your opponent can definitely get rid of it. It gets in the way. It's useful in control matchups because you have to banish it, or it just keeps hanging around. Control doesn't like it because of the agile. Control doesn't like it because it keeps coming back, so it's hard for... I mean, we're talking, you know, to some degree I've been talking about how you drop the bombs in yellow-green and your opponent runs out of resources because stuff like Short Stag and Chariot's Murmur demand 2-for-1s, 3-for-1s. But if they're using Fated Firebird, the card keeps coming back. You're not getting the card advantage and the hand advantage you're used to getting. So this is good against. This is definitely good against control. They don't want to banish it, but it's just so irritating, and it keeps coming back. Your hand essentially is always just that little bit fuller. Very, very annoying. Pretty good. I don't know about all red-green, but it has a place. It definitely has a place. Herald of Famine is too situational. 3-5 for 4 is okay. Lurker, I guess. Like, none of this is amazing. But, you know, when your opponent burns a card, deal 3 damage to them. If you can get Herald of Famine out early, this is great. But if you get it out late, like, what is... This isn't enough. This is no good. Apparently I own it, but I've never even played it because I've seen other people play it and it's a waste. I don't see it in too many decks, apart from meme decks where they're trying to get all the heralds out. If you don't get it out early, there are consistent 4 mana drops that can give you something consistent and reliable. And this just 3 damage every time they burn a card is significant, you know. If you can get this out on turn 4 and it's in a corner, and they are, I mean, is your opponent not going to burn cards? No way. But it's also quite difficult to get rid of a 3-5 lurker as well. So you could generate some value from it. Maybe it's okay. At the same time though, if you get too tricky, if you're in good and you put this in a corner and you're like, oh wow, you know, like now they're gonna have to devote resources. Aggro could just go, well no, not really. You've just used your turn 4. Great, I'm going to take 3 damage, but my Wyvern's coming down and my Trapezist is attacking. And, you know, I've got a Strigoi Pup. I could not, like, this is, you're dealing 3 damage, I don't care. Like, I'm aggro and I'm just going to deal way more damage than this. You're not going to be able to keep up with me. You know, 3 damage every time they burn, maybe 3 damage of from the Herald itself. So maybe 6 damage a turn. You know, from turn 5 onwards. Certainly not great. It's as Mythics go, this is probably one of the worst ones. Familiar Spirit. I mean, 2 mana, 2 gems. We already talked about sort of Jade Puma and stuff like that in yellow evaluation. This is similar. It's the 2 gem cost is really irritating. Agile on a 2-1. To a large degree, your opponent's thinking, okay, well, so what? You have Agile, like it's 2 damage. You know, I'll just take 2 damage a turn. That's not a massive deal. You know, it's okay. Has Immortal while adjacent to a Witch. It's not so valuable that you're thinking, oh, I really need Immortal on this. You know, it's just a thing. It's okay. You know, I can conceivably see a green deck which is really good against aggro style and mid range, where you've got your witches and you've got your ability to rush down, you've got your Bella and so on, and because Familiar Spirit just isn't going anywhere and it keeps attacking in, aggro isn't going anywhere and you can't banish it. Aggro can't do anything against it if it's next to a witch, but witches aren't that hard to destroy as a general rule. You know, aggro will just attack the witch next to it. Familiar Spirit plus Red Cliffs would be so irritating though. Incredibly irritating. I could conceivably see putting down Red Cliffs on lane 2, Familiar Spirit on top of it, with a Witch on lane 1 in the corner with Lurker. And you know, that negates all rush. Your opponent has to attack the Familiar, you has to get rid of the Familiar Sprite before he can get to the Witch. You'd be demanding your opponent use remove effects that they have very finite resources in, at least at this stage in the game. You really only have like maybe, in terms of Spirited Away, what is it, like 2-3 copies? You don't want to use one on a Witch, you don't want to use one on a Sprite. It could be good, it could demand Focus Fire from your opponent. But that's sort of a very specific situation. In general, this goes to the face for 2 damage, and your opponent's like, okay, well, congratulations. I don't know what else to say. That's the end. I think it's already clear. Like, I'm not going to give like an overview of the colour so much as I think it's already clear that I think green is sort of a balanced colour that goes into a lot of archetypes. It can go into a lot of other colours. It has a lot to offer in a lot of different directions. Very unlike yellow in some ways. I'm not rating the colours. In terms of versatility though, you definitely have to say that green is more versatile and can go in more different ways than yellow can. Okay, well I've knackered myself again. Voice is gone. Hopefully this will all be worth it though, eventually.